It's not only the economic links, it's because the economics are very important. Israel is doing quite well economically, but even more important than economics is the geopolitical links, like you mentioned. So the geopolitical links are double. The geopolitical links between the Eastern Mediterranean region, indeed, Israel, Jordan, Cyprus, Egypt, and Turkey. Turkey is coming back into the fold of the whole Eastern Mediterranean. It's been kept out, and it doesn't like the fact that it's been kept out. So first of all, we're all talking together, and that is vitally important. And then, yes, to improve the geopolitical links with Europe.
I'm your host, Leslie Palti-Guzman. In each episode of this podcast, we chat with energy experts from all around the world. We exchange on timely energy issues as well on their life experience. You will learn a lot, whether you're an energy aficionado or a newbie. It's May 27, 2022, and time for a new Energy Vista episode. Today I'm exchanging with Gina Cohen, who is a natural gas analyst and consultant in the Eastern Mediterranean for more than 2 decades, with a focus on Israel, Jordan, Cyprus, Turkey, Egypt, and the Palestinian Authority. Gina lectures at various universities around the world, including at the Technion University in Haifa and the Cypriot University in Larnaca. She has penned policy papers and speaks at major international oil and gas conferences. And actually, we met a few years ago in Amsterdam at the Flame Gas Conference. Hi, Gina.
Hi, Leslie.
Well, I'm very, very happy to have you on the podcast today because Israeli gas is hot right now. Everybody is talking about it suddenly, given Europe's urgent needs to replace Russian gas dependency by a more balanced diversification of sources, especially following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, and actually this week, the EU, the European Union has just, is apparently discussing a deal with the Israeli government to import more gas via Egypt. And maybe we'll talk about this. But first, what has been very, interesting for me to watch over almost 10 years now since Israel started first production at Tamar, one of the big field, and then Leviathan, is that it has been a big success story first and foremost for the Israeli domestic market.
Yes.
Because Israel used to be very dependent on imports of all kind of fuels, and it has been able to displace some of the coal imports and replace it by gas, which actually is also an environmental story, a good environmental story, because of this displacement of coal and dirtier fuels, and also a very successful geopolitical story, because exports to Egypt and now Jordan too have consolidated economic ties between these countries. So Gina, tell us a little bit what's the status now of Israeli gas at home, and regionally, why is it so attractive right now?
Well, yes, it's quite interesting the way you put it, because it is true that geopolitically, Israel has thus benefited on two levels. As you said, our geopolitical relationship has improved by the fact that we are now half at least independent energy-wise. Because until several years ago, Israel was totally dependent on all of its energy imports, and most of the energy was being imported by countries which were either hostile or, in the very least, not friendly towards Israel. And there were many occasions when we were very worried that we would not be able to get the energy we need. So thus, having discovered over the last decades over 1,000 BCM of gas, this has enabled Israel really to no longer have to import a lot of its energy and to strengthen its geopolitical position. And as you said, on the second front of exports, which is exactly the other end of the coin, the other side of the coin, because the country consumes about 12 or 13 BCM of gas out of the 1,000 that we have discovered, we are able to export some of this gas. And we're exporting it, as is the want of gas, to countries which are near Israel. And these two countries for now are Jordan and Egypt, because gas is a difficult product to both store and transport over long distances. It is possible to do so, and it is done indeed very much around the world, but it is easier to transport it to countries which are near. And these two countries that are in strong need of gas is, first of all, Jordan, that has no energy of its own, and Egypt, which has, but we can discuss that aspect in greater length later on. So,
And to tell our listeners how significant it is that Israel can use Egyptian liquefaction facilities to export its own gas, I think this is the only example globally where this is happening. I don't have in mind, maybe I'm wrong, but I'll check. But I think that's the only two countries that are have this kind of partnership with one country has reserves and is using the facilities of the other one to export it. Many other countries have tried, but it failed. And so it's interesting, that it's happening in this region, which is often, not an easy one, geopolitically speaking, and very tense at times. So I think it's very significant.
yeah, so first of all, just one more point about what is happening locally. So, over 70% of our power generation goes from natural gas. The
Mhm. And
rest,
the goal is to reach like 80,
yes,
85%.
yes. So the rest is still about 23% coal and about 7 or 8% renewables. Um, we're trying also to have electric cars or CNG or LNG operated cars. This is a much slower process. So on the export front, yes, I think that one or two countries have tried in the past. I thought that maybe Oman or another country had succeeded in using another country's facilities.
Well, Oman, I think, tried for years. I mean,
Okay.
Iran, Oman had discussed. I think East Timor and Australia had discussed.
Okay.
Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago have discussed. Mozambique and Tanzania. It should be obvious, but it's not really, happening on the
So I
on the
didn't.
ground. Yeah, it's not easy.
So yeah, so then Egypt has two liquefaction facilities which can export a total of just over 17 BCM. And over the years, Egypt has become either a net exporter or an importer, depending on how much gas it discovered of its own, depending on the pricing, depending on regulations. Because most of the time, when it had to import gas, this was done because of mistaken regulation and mistaken pricing. Namely, the price was too low, and therefore Egypt was not able to produce enough gas and consume too much because the price was so low. But at this this point in time, Egypt is exporting about 8 or 9 BCM. And some of this is indeed Israeli molecules. So there's a pipeline between Egypt and Israel. People probably don't know the geography so well, but there's a place in the south of Israel on the western Mediterranean coast called Ashkelon, and it links up to a place called El Arish in Egypt. This was a pipeline built over a decade ago to import gas from Egypt to Israel, but now it is used in the opposite direction. And Israel has a contract to export gas from Israel to Egypt. Um, Part of this gas is used in Egypt proper, and part of it goes into the Egyptian transmission system down into specifically one of the Egyptian facilities, which is operated by World Shell, called IDKU in Egypt. And yes, and some of these molecules are going either to Asia or Europe.
Yeah. So Israeli gas is reaching global markets, and as you said, there is no guarantee it goes to Europe. It can go anywhere. Tell us a little bit about the potential cooperation between Cyprus, who has also reserves. So Egypt has its own gas and had recent, more discoveries and various players involved. In the past, we had discussed also Lebanon. So there is like a very attractive play potentially in the region. What do you think is the future of all this gas? Some of that will remain underground, or do you think now with the crisis in Europe, there is more impetus to try to diversify the export routes? And I know that beyond Egypt, there are discussions for floating LNG export plants in Israel standalone. What are the odds of success?
Okay, so Egypt produces and consumes about 70 BCM. Cyprus is a small island of less than 1 million people, and their requirements is between a half and 1 BCM of gas. They have discovered about 400 BCM, but have been unable today to produce any of it. Nothing has been developed, nothing has been produced in the last decade. So the only option for Cypriot gas is to export it, maybe do a small pipeline which could bring the offshore gas to Cyprus, so Cyprus could have a bit of gas on its own. Um, Over the last few years, Cyprus has attempted to bring the gas to Egypt also, just like Israel is doing. The benefit for Cyprus is that it has no quota. Israel has a quota of about 550, 600 BCM that has to remain for local consumption because we have the need for the gas. Cyprus, since it has very little need, has no quota, so all the gas can be exported. Despite this, it has not succeeded in doing anything. 2 days ago, the two presidents of the countries met in Cairo, of Egypt and of Cyprus. We discussed again the desire to bring Cypriot gas down to Egypt, but such projects each time anew take about 5 years to reach fruition from the date that FID, final investment decision, is taken, and no decision has been taken yet. But yes, this triangle between Egypt, Cyprus, and Israel has the potential, if you take the gas from these three countries and the need from these three countries to reach, for instance, Europe, because Europe is what we're interested in now.
And it has the advantage also to fit into Europe's carbon neutrality goals in a way, and climate concerns, in the fact that it's not using Egyptian liquefaction plants is not building a new infrastructure. It's existing one that are actually older, so maybe less efficient in one end, but on the other hand, you don't bring a new infrastructure, that you may only use for 20 years.
Yes, that's true, but there are difficulties.
So tell us a little bit exactly, because it makes the other countries of the region depend like they depend on the political will of the Egyptian government and on the domestic needs of Egyptian gas. So in the past, we've seen that if Egypt has increased domestic needs for its gas, it doesn't hesitate to redirect the gas dedicated to the export market to the import market, to the domestic market.
Yes, so there's lots of moving parts indeed. So yes, you're right. Not having to build a new plant is very good, because concerns of investors are building a new facility and it may become stranded. And this is also the message which is being given out by the European Union. Oh, building projects and they may become stranded. So this indeed, the two facilities in Israel were constructed, in Egypt were constructed in 2005. They've been fully amortized, but they are old or inefficient, so they waste about 15% of the feedstock gas. A pipeline would have to be built because the pipeline that exists is not big enough. So a pipeline would have to be built from Israel offshore to Egypt.
So in any case, it requires new infrastructure.
It requires a new infrastructure of a couple of $1 billion, a new, bigger direct pipeline. And then, indeed, you're dependent on the whims of a foreign government, of the Egyptian government, and the uncertainty of how much gas they have. And even, as you said, the desire of Egypt is, and the demand that any contract that is made is required to maybe diversify the gas to Egypt if Egypt does not have enough gas. And the price in Egypt and the credibility of Egypt paying is lower than potentially the price for export and the credibility of getting paid for exporting the gas. So that is an issue. But it is the quickest and easiest option to move ahead, is bringing further gas to Egypt. And it is certainly an important project. The other one you mentioned before is doing an FLNG in Israel. So the Leviathan partners are examining this. The advantage,
so it's an offshore liquefaction.
Yes, offshore. The great advantage of this is that you're not dependent on any country in any aspect whatsoever. That means you're building the facility in your own waters, not in foreign waters. You do not have to have any transit, because you don't have to bring the gas to Egypt or bring the gas to Turkey in order to ship it from there. You do not have to transit another country to bring the gas to the end consumer. If you do a pipeline directly to Europe, you're transiting the seas of different countries in order to bring the gas to Europe. And you have the flexibility of selling it to whoever you want, to Europe or to Asia. So this is the great advantage of an FLNG, total flexibility, or as big a flexibility as you can possibly have. Because you still are dependent, of course, on Singapore or Chinese shipyards to build the facilities. And
Actually, there is a lot of demand right now. There is about 10 proposals of floating LNG projects worldwide.
Yeah, so there's
So as
probably
you
a big
said,
bottleneck. Yes, a
yeah,
bottleneck.
the shipyards are going to be busy.
So the shipyards are busy, bottleneck, and if you go into the FLNG, it's a very niche market. There's only been half a dozen constructed around the world. Lots of them are very small. Some of them are even a half a million tons per annum. The biggest one, I think, is a Prelude, which has suffered lots of problems. So, but the partners are examining that, and the flexibility is important, and the lower geopolitical risks are important, and the technology exists, so it is certainly doable.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
And so to come back to the Egyptian liquefaction plants, right now they are underutilized. So there is a possibility to ramp up exports from Egypt in the medium term. Like how soon do you think more Israeli gas can reach Egyptian facilities so that eventually this gas reach Europe or elsewhere?
so for now, about 5 BCM, 5 or 6 BCM can reach between Israel and Egypt because there are bottlenecks in the Egyptian transmission, in the Israeli transmission system. These bottlenecks will be opened up next year because the Israeli transmission company is building an offshore line between two seaports in Israel, Ashdod and Ashkelon, and that will bypass the bottlenecks on the onshore pipeline. They were supposed to finish this by April 2023. They've just made an announcement that the window for completing it is between April and October 2023. So it may take until October 2023 before this bottleneck is opened, which would mean that 7 BCM could be exported between Israel and Egypt. Some of this would go to the local market, and some of it would be exported. This is more or less the limit for now until a new pipeline, either onshore or offshore, is constructed in order to reach maybe another 8 or 10 BCM
Yeah.
of exports.
So there has been a new coalition, a new government coalition in Israel last year, a new energy minister that seemed less friendly to gas exploration, production, exports in Israel. Can you tell us a little bit like potential challenges at home in Israel in terms of environmental considerations? I know in the past there has been discussion maybe about a carbon pricing. There has been some, environmental movements. Give us a little bit this landscape. Like, what do we see in the Israeli civil society
Well,
and government?
the minister, Karin El indeed started off saying she's not even going to deal with gas for the first year of her ministry and only deal with renewables, which was a big blow for the gas market. She then somewhat retracted even before the Ukraine invasion when she had so much criticism levied against her that since Israel has gas and solar is such a complex energy source that she has to deal with it. But in the meantime, she has not reopened the sea for new exploration, and she's torn between environmentalist and more left-wing elements within her party or the country that indeed are pushing for her to move with renewables. And these environmentalists made a huge problem when we tried to set up the Leviathan platform offshore Israel at about 9 kilometers away from the shore. So doing an FLNG and getting the regulations for an FLNG for this floating liquefaction facility is going to be hard in any circumstances. And with a minister who is both influenced by environmentalists, who has very little, if no, energy and certainly no gas experience, and is rather a weak element within the government, is going to be harder to push through the regulations. And none of the regulations have even started. The ministry has not started any of the regulations on the permitting, on the siting of where such a facility should be. So this is one of the major hurdles. The government is one of the major hurdles for the FLNG facility, in my view.
Very interesting. Global prices right now, they favor, increased production and exports. Do you think that would be a game changer eventually for the government to understand that they can make more money out of exports?
Well, I think it's going to be a game changer because it makes it much more difficult for them to remain on that track. So we're not dealing with gas. Luckily, they probably don't understand that gas prices are very volatile, and the high prices that are today, they will probably last 3 or 4 years, but lower down the line, prices will probably revert back to some kind of more norm of around $10. So yes, it's going to help Europe and Israel to make a deal, because there's going to be pressure on the ministry that you cannot miss this opportunity. Yeah.
And it seems that, geopolitically, it's kind of a unique window for Israel to tie more its links, economic links with Europe.
It's not only the economic links, it's because the economics are very important. Israel is doing quite well economically, and the unemployment is low, and we've got a good budget, and standard of living is relatively to quite high. Money is very, very important, of course, especially we spent over $60 billion on the COVID. But even more important than economics is the geopolitical links, like you mentioned. So the geopolitical links are double. The geopolitical links between the Eastern Mediterranean region, indeed, Israel, Jordan, Cyprus, Egypt, and Turkey. Turkey is coming back into the fold of the whole Eastern Mediterranean. It's been kept out, and it doesn't like the fact that it's been kept out. So first of all, we're all talking together, and that is vitally important. And then yes, to improve the geopolitical links with Europe. So even more than the money, the geopolitical links and ties, the exchange of ideas and the exchange of technology is even more, or just as important, maybe not more important, but just as important.
Yeah, and this exchange is starting potentially with gas trade, but it's not going to stop there. It will go beyond. It's the startup ecosystem, it's the renewable, it's maybe one day hydrogen. I mean, once you start cooperation, it's just the beginning.
Yes,
So I
yes.
think, yeah, very positive developments. And actually, we've seen also a reshaping of alliance between Israel and the Gulf countries. And Abu Dhabi recently took ownership of some stakes, I think, in the
Yes,
Tamar field.
yes, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about, the significance of that, and whether you see further down the road, maybe more energy cooperation between the Gulf and Israel?
Yes, the Emiratis, Mubadala Petroleum, they bought 25% of Tamar, which is unbelievable. I mean, nobody could have imagined this a few years ago. So we have Chevron, the first or second biggest oil and gas company in America. They are the operator. We have Mubadala that has 25% stake in a huge field here. We have a Greek company that has ownership of 100 BCM of gas. So this is really good news. And further down the line, I mean, there's potential talk just on the sidelines, the beginning of talks of potentially maybe even the Qataris could be involved in some aspect, maybe between another potential project of bringing Israeli gas via Cyprus to Turkey. So yes, Palestinians, they have a small field, and it could be developed one day. So it helps a lot of rapprochement and, like you say, alliances between the region.
Yeah, and it all started, I should have mentioned earlier, following the Abraham Accord.
Yes, indeed.
What about Saudi Arabia? It's the only one yet that didn't join the
Yes,
the
yeah,
party.
in and out, out and in. I
Uh,
think there's a potential for
for
rapprochement
more,
between them. But Turkey is important. You haven't mentioned Turkey, and Turkey is
yeah, yeah.
important.
So tell me about Turkey. Turkey was left out I mean, decided not to participate to this cooperation with Eastern Mediterranean gas, and actually dispute some of the fields offshore. And there is still this ongoing unresolved conflict with Cyprus. But suddenly, especially following the Russian-Ukraine war, Turkey, I think, understands the risk also for its own consumption of gas. Like, its high dependence on Russian gas is risky, and wants to diversify its sources. And in the past, I remember when Israel first discovered its resources, they had in mind Turkey as a main market. And now all the infrastructure is geared toward Egypt. So, what does it mean for Turkey? Is it too late?
Well, yes, well, Turkey, I think, never believed that Israel would sell gas to Egypt. They thought this is never going to happen. So they miscalculated the negotiations, and they were asking for too low a price. And so a deal was not made. Um, and and then Israel and Egypt and Cyprus and Italy and France and the Palestinians formed this Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, and Turkey and Lebanon were left out. And now the Abraham Accords, and Turkey feels that Israel is getting closer to all kinds of other countries in the region, and they feel even more left out. And they are talking once again with Israel, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey was in Israel this week. Talks about gas. Is it too late? It's not too late, because from the 400 BCM of gas that can be exported, only about 150 BCM have been contracted to Egypt and Jordan. So there is another phase of development, and Turkey is definitely one of the options. So too late is not the issue, but the bad blood between the two countries over the 10 years is what has caused problems. And this bad blood was unnecessary, because Israel and Turkey were in very good relations. And Turkey is, as you say, A, worried about its own sources, and B, it wants to play a role as a hub. And it's lots of gas is going via Turkey to Europe. And so this is gas from Iran, Russia, and Azerbaijan. And that question has to be asked whether Europe wants to get any more of the gas from any of these three sources, even Azerbaijan or Turkmenistan. These are countries that Europe may think, well, we prefer to have from countries like Cyprus and Israel.
So at the beginning, actually, when the Southern Gas Corridor was discussed, the idea was not just to take Azeri gas, but also at one point taking more regional gas, whether it's Iran, Israeli, Cyprus. Do you think it's still on the table or not really? Could the East Med gas join this pipeline or not, this route?
It could, yes, it could. We could build a 500-kilometer pipeline going into southern Turkey, and from there join the transmission system and go into Tanap and Tap. Tanap and Tap would have to be expanded because their capacity is currently fully used by Azeri gas. The capacity can be expanded with compression. Yes, it's an option. It's definitely one of the...
It would make the Italian happy.
Yes, Bulgaria, Hungary, Greece, Italians, it's an option. It's definitely one of the options. The main problem with this option is the geopolitical relationship between the two countries. Otherwise, building a pipeline, not having to do liquefaction, right into the heart there of Europe once you get into Turkey, and it's a very good option technically and time-wise. The main problem with this one is the geopolitical problem.
Yeah. And what about the green dimension? So right now, Europe only talks about hydrogen-ready infrastructure and, how to transition away from carbon-intense fuels to less carbon-intense fuels. Do you think that the East Med gas is considering already carbon capture and sequestration or ways to blend at one point gas and hydrogen that would make also new infrastructure more appealing to the European market?
Well, the Europeans are also talking about diversification of gas, like you said in the beginning. They're discussing buying extra gas from Israel. I don't think that the companies here have looked yet at CCS or hydrogen in any serious matter. So, yeah, I think that's too early, and maybe we have to start doing that. But I think we have to try and play into the need of the Europeans for diversification from reliable and open sources of gas. You haven't mentioned also the fourth option, which is what is called the Eastern Mediterranean pipeline from Poseidon. This is this Greek-Italian company that wants to build a pipeline directly between Israel and Italy. So that's an option. It's quite a low carbon option because they are looking at the potential of building such a pipeline, which could in the future cater to hydrogen. So yes, these are European companies, and they are looking at that option. So this is the one entity that is looking at how to build new infrastructure that can cater to future European demands.
Great. Well, okay. So many options on the table. A few will succeed. But Gina, it's time to move to your personal trajectory. You have a perfect British accent. Tell us a little bit about your past, trajectory, and how you came to the global gas industry and became an expert in the field.
Okay, well, I was born in England from a Belgian father and an English mother, so I speak French and English, like you do, Leslie, and immigrated to Israel when I was 18. Got married, had kids, got divorced, and needed a job. And British Gas from England decided to open an office here. And I was hired as the office manager in 1998. Opened the office and got the local staff, administration staff, cars, homes for the expats. We drilled. We discovered gas offshore Gaza and Palestinian waters. Discovered some potential Israeli gas, the Tamar and the Leviathan fields, which BG made the first foray into these fields. And then it was after the Oslo Accords, the peace accords between Israel and Palestinians, and there was a whole ceremony at the sea with President Arafat at the time for the discovery of this Palestinian gas and discovery of Israeli gas, and all the management of British Gas came from England, went to sea, and they said to me, "There's a conference in the Parliament. Go and listen to the conference." They would never send me to the conference because they did not look at the local Jewish Israeli women divorce administration staff in the office, but they wanted to be on the rig, and they sent me to the Parliament. I got there and I said, "Where is there a conference?" They said, "Well, this is the Parliament. We don't have conferences." I said, "We got something on gas." I said, "Yes, we got this select committee against this company called British Gas that has discovered Palestinian gas." I was in shock, of course. I called my manager. I said, "Hugh, what do I do?" And he said, "Whatever you do, don't say anything." And I thought to myself, what an idiot. And of course, I'm not going to talk about the cars I bought and the filing system that I put in place. Walked into the Parliament and heard all the ministers and the committee attacking us, and put my hand up and found myself 10 minutes later giving a speech in Parliament defending gas and defending British Gas.
So what was the fear at the time? Like what was the opposition about?
Well, it was twofold. It was okay, peace accords aside, does Israel want to be dependent on Palestinian gas? This was the only one of two fields that had been discovered. There was this field of 30 BCM and another small Israeli field of 30 BCM. We don't want to be dependent on Palestinian gas, and we don't want money to go to the Palestinians. So this was like the political aspect of it. And then there was a commercial aspect. The company that had discovered the Israeli gas had mounted this campaign against Palestinian gas, and they called this blue and white gas, and they did not want competition. So anyway, I came back to the office, and the manager said to me, "Well, we're not going to shut you up, so we might as well start teaching you about gas." And I've been busy doing it ever since.
Yeah, and since then, BG left. Was bought, and
yeah.
new companies have joined.
Yes, BG left Israel already in 2004, and then 10 years later it was bought over by Shell, and now, as you say, I'm a lecturer at the universities, and I've published a couple of books, and I'm working as a consultant for blue and white gas, and still for Palestinian gas, trying to get all this put together in some way.
Very interesting. And so you enjoy also speaking at conferences. And I remember when I started, going to conferences, maybe back in 2007, I remember one Israeli person, but he was the only one. And it seems that now you're sometimes also the only one. So you're like the voice for the country.
It's very strange because, I've been interviewed by German television this week, and Italian and Netflame. And I think it's very much because I do speak with an English accent, and I don't have a very strong Israeli accent. Then there's this other thing. Many of the conferences seem to fall on Independence Day or Yom Kippur Day, and the Israeli government refuses to go, and I am very flexible to go. Many of the conferences demand that people pay their own way, and I'm willing to pay my own way. Consult. So I'm speaking a lot, and I enjoy it, and I like representing the country.
Yeah.
And it's nice doing it and feeling one's doing one's own little thing. I was interviewed the other day in this German newspaper, and it was all in German, and I couldn't, of course, understand it. And somebody who lives in my building said to me, "I saw your picture. I think it's you. There's this really good pro-Israeli article from this."
So your neighbor speaks German.
from this, yes, he lives in Germany. He found it from Germany. He said from this journalist who always writes against Israel. So I did not know that he wrote against Israel, but I was happy that it was a pro-Israeli article.
Very good. Well, thank you for your work and giving us your insight on ISMED. And we'll talk again because I think it's only the renewed interest is only starting, and we'll see more developments coming up.
Thank you, Leslie. It was
Thank you, Gina.
nice talking to you. I learned myself by listening to your questions. They're really good questions.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye.
This episode was recorded on May 27, 2022. This is Leslie Palti-Guzman saying good day and good luck.